Welcome to the latest edition of the Mind Gut Conversation podcast, a place to learn from thought leaders in the area of health and wellness, food, the science of mind-body interactions, and the environment. Today, I have the great pleasure to speak to Sonu Shivdasani, a visionary Indian wellness resort entrepreneur who is the CEO and founder of Soneva Fushi and Soneva Jani and other luxury wellness resorts in Southeast Asia. Sonu is an Eton and Oxford graduate and 2 times cancer survivor and has realized his dreams in synergy with his wife, Eva. Having just spent 10 days at the Soul Festival on Soneva Fushi, which was co-sponsored by Soneva and Organic India, I'm still amazed at the scope and uniqueness of the experience, touching every aspect of human life from the physical, emotional, spiritual, and planetary. By talking with him, it became clear that this unique experience was a reflection of Sonu's and Eva's own beliefs and core values. Welcome to the show, Sonu. Sonu, it's a real pleasure to talk to you again, even though we've just seen each other a few days ago.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. It's a pleasure to. Yeah.
And having just spent 10 days at one of your amazing resorts during the Soul Festival, I want to start this conversation with just a brief summary of the impressions that I had from this experience, and then sort of lead into the first question. So I'm still amazed at the scope and the uniqueness of the experience. So touching every aspect of human life from physical, emotional, spiritual, planetary, which is rare at meetings like that. And when talking to your guests, employees, and people that know you well, it became clear that the experience that we had is really a reflection of your own beliefs and core values in synergy with your wife, Eva. So the first question is, how did you become this unique individual? What were the key life experiences that made you that person?
Right. Thank you for that question. And thank you for your compliments. You're very kind. Yes, so we've just spent 10 days on the same island as Bruce Lipton. And so, he spoke about how you're programmed, up to the age of 7. And I would say that was an important part in terms of my father. So not so much my mother, but certainly my father was a very strong influence on me. He was definitely my secure base as I was growing up, and potentially my only secure base when I was young. Unfortunately, he passed away when I was 13, but whilst he was alive, and certainly as I was being influenced, he played an important role. So he was he had me quite late. I think he was about 45. He'd had one heart attack already. He was born in 1980 and I was born in 1965. So he'd been 47 actually. So he had me quite late. He'd had one heart attack in his life. His career was at its most successful when I was growing up. But he'd gone through a lot during his life. He came from a background of civil servants. So his father was the governor. The British Raj had separated India into 4 quarters, and his father was the sort of administrator, the Indian administrator of 1 quarter of the country, which was the northern part of the country. He'd gone through some ups and downs from being the son of a very influential individual, influencing, at least for the Indian population, 1/4 of the country in the north, to in 1947, on the 15th of August, suddenly realizing that they were the wrong religion and wrong race in the wrong part of this on the wrong land. So they had to just leave their homes. He'd had ups and downs in Cambridge's, even in his career, he'd ups and downs. And I think for him, he instilled sort of great moral values and a philosophy in life. He believed that one's struggles and trials actually shape and define us. He was very much a God-fearing individual. So I think he definitely played an important role in shaping my views. And then, of course, I met Eva. So he passed away when I was 13. I was slightly rudderless. My mother was lost. She is very traditional. She was very traditional Indian. So she sort of shrank once the husband had passed away, and it was really my elder brother who led the family. And so my elder brother and sister tried hard, but they couldn't replace the role my father played. And then, of course, I met Ava, and she became a big influence in the secure base. And of course, there were also some really good experiences that happened to me. So I feel blessed. I hated prep school. I went to prep school at 7, which I would not recommend. It was very much standard. You know, my father did nothing wrong. It was every parent, at least in England in those days, would send their children to prep school and you know, expect their children to be beaten by the headmaster or the master. It was quite yeah, it was difficult. You know, you lost the security, the family, the bond. You were there with lots of other people. It was quite strange at such a young age. But so I hated that until about the age of 11. Being of foreign origin as well, I was teased a bit, and I was a bit of an outsider, but that shaped me as well. But by the time I was 11, I'd made some good friends. But then I went to Eton at 13, and that was one of the best things that happened to me as well. It was a fantastic school. We had about 250 students in each year, incredible professors and teachers, a lot of freedom. So you had a lot of freedom to pursue your activities. The only thing you had to do is you had to use your time wisely and productively. And you would be rewarded if you did use it in a productive manner. But you had some of the best music schools for a school of that age. You had 20 pianos. You had a theatre center. It was a very, you know, rich, well-endowed school with lots of facilities, great people. I made a lot of great friends there. So that was that also had a big influence on me. And then, of course, you know, meeting my wife.
Did your father have any ideas what he wanted you to become?
Yeah, I think he would have hoped that I'd followed in the family business, which was, he was a very successful trading with Nigeria. By the time I graduated, the price of oil had dropped from about $40 a barrel to 7 or 8. So the previous governments had been quite corrupt and had undermined the economy. And so the country was largely indebted. They had very little foreign exchange reserves. And for the sort of business that my father had been in, which my brother was running, it was a very difficult time. So it gave me an opportunity to pursue new ambitions and dreams.
So before you met your wife, Eva, you really didn't have any of these ideas, which later then you know, made a reality. I mean, it was much more a
Yeah. It was
classic.
agile. No, exactly. So I didn't go to hotel school. Perhaps it was a good thing because I would have been conditioned, most probably. So, you know, I studied English literature at Oxford because with English universities, you don't really study a métier. It's not like a polytechnic where you study a skill that you then go on to pursue. At English universities, it's more the learning process. And I studied English literature because I enjoyed reading books. As simple as that. I had no ambitions or to be a journalist or to be a writer. And so that's how I ended up there.
Okay. So you have achieved some amazing accomplishments despite having to overcome several serious challenges to your own well-being, your health, your business success, all demonstrating a remarkable amount of resilience. What has been your secret? Was that your upbringing? Was that your father's values? Or
yeah, I think it's very important in difficult times to have a clear compass. You know, if you're in a storm and you're a sailor, you're looking at the compass all the time just to make sure you're on the right direction, because you know you get it. It's very disconcerting, and you lose your perspective. So having a clear compass, and for us, it's been this idea of ever since Ava and I started with Soneva Fushi, and even when we had the concept, was the idea that companies need to have a purpose beyond simply enriching the two of us and paying employees a salary. And so we used to articulate it differently. When we started, it was all about creating unique experiences for our guests in a sustainable environment. Today, it's imaginative and engaging slow life. Slow life for two reasons. So slow life is an acronym because we have 30 to 40 languages amongst our hosts. But also slow life just meaning this idea of offering our guests luxuries whilst minimizing our impact on the planet and at the same time enhancing the well-being of our guests. So taking these concepts that were opposite. So traditionally people would say, well, if it's sustainable, it can't be luxurious, or if it's luxurious, it can't be terribly good for you. And taking wellness, sustainability, and luxury and showing that you can do something different. And we do that by questioning and challenging what is a luxury, because luxury is a word that's always misused. You know, it's used so much. I feel awkward actually using it myself, but it's the best descriptor of, you know, what I want to convey. But, you know, people sometimes refer to objects as luxury, like gold and gilt. But essentially, luxury is it's a philosophy. It's something that's unique, something that you don't get every day, that's not commonplace, that's rare. You know, I'd say rare is the best word. Something that's also new, that rings a chord in your heart, but also at the same time true. It rings a chord in your heart when you try it. And the context of the success of the change, you know, historically, it was the landed gentry living in the countryside, fresh air, food, privacy. Today, it's the opposite. They're urban. Our guests are urban. They're self-made. And just, you might be the most successful man in England or have a 40-story building in India, but can you walk barefoot for a week, or have that salad that was plucked from the garden that morning, or watch the stars through one of the largest telescopes wherever we operate, and have someone like Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon, who's been a few times as an enthusiast, explain his journeys, or our resident astronomer explain this fantastic universe out there, or watch a movie where the...
Was this a totally new concept when you started this, or were there other examples, or I mean, how did you come up with this?
Well, barefoot, you know, Eva and I sort of both used to spend our summers in the Mediterranean. My father loved boats, so I'd spend my summer on a boat. Ava's father had a boat. So, you know, on a boat, you're very much barefoot. So we were very used to, both of us, being barefoot on holiday in the sun. So it was natural that the first thing we'd do when guests arrived on our island before they arrived on the island would be to take their shoes, put in a bag which says no new shoes. So they arrive on the island barefoot. And that allowed us then to create less infrastructure. You know, the roads are a soft sand, but compact enough so that the buggies can run, but kind on your feet. You know, it's very nice when you're walking. We know the benefits now of grounding and earthing. For us, it was just a natural gut instinct. But now, obviously, research is showing that apart from being a luxury because it's rare to do that if you're living in a city, it was obviously more sustainable because it meant we didn't have to build tarmac, concrete, bitumen roads because people were walking barefoot. And some of our public areas are sand rather than marbled restaurants or floored restaurants. But you know, we've discovered more recently that it's also healthy for you as well. So it's a perfect example of where something is luxurious but also sustainable and healthy.
Yeah. I mean, of these many accomplishments, and I have to say, well, let me ask you this first. For all these details that you experience being, that I haven't been at any of your other places, but that we experienced during these 10 days. I mean, it goes from the architecture, from the friendliness of the people, the way the staff interacts with the guests, the quality of the food. I mean, you could make a long list of things. Have you all have your hand in this in a detailed way, or have you had consultants?
Yeah, no, we're quite involved. So I think one of the things, you know, you talk about the harmony. I think the fact is that there are other hotels that are built by a long boardroom of consultants. So when we were with Six Senses, when we had Six Senses, which was another brand which I sold, there we were growing by managing other people's hotels. And so I got that experience because we had never experienced that before. So the first time I experienced this was when we were talking to other developers who were developing a hotel and they wanted us to operate it for them. And you'd walk into this long meeting and there would be about 20 people sitting there, all having some role in designing a hotel. And for Eva and I, this was really foreign because, you know, we we started as, I just graduated from Oxford in '88. I'd met Eva in 1986, during my first year at university. She'd been traveling. She'd been a very successful model. So she'd managed to travel to really remote places around the world. And on a shoot for a German company back in the '80s, she went to the Maldives when there were only 3 or 4 hotels. So as soon as we met each other, because I was from India, we went there on holiday. We did a trip in India, the north of India, and then we went to the Maldives, and we were blown away, and we kept on coming back again and again. And so finally, we had this opportunity to lease this island in '91, but we had no experience in, firstly, construction, operations in Asia, hotels, and so it was all quite foreign to us. But we had a clear vision, and our teams were very small. And I think where we had a competitive advantage over these hotels that are designed by these fantastic consultants, but lots of different people, was that there was a consistency, because there was a couple who were designing every detail. So Eva does the interiors, but she was also designing all the crockery as well, and the pencil. So she was involved in the operating equipment as well as the FF&E, the furniture, fixture, and extras. I was sort of designing the architecture in the field in terms of, the roof materials, the floor materials, the wall materials, and we'd obviously collaborate a lot. And so you had this very consistent experience. And then, of course, we had this core purpose of slow life. We articulated it, as I said, in a different way. And I can't remember how we described it at the time, but it was really this idea of sustainability and wellness and luxury, and all going hand in hand. And so, with that as our core purpose, we started thinking about the food we eat. The food has to be sustainable, but it also has to be healthy for you. Health, and hence a big effort in organic gardens, and bringing in not just a gardener, a horticulturist, to just spray pesticides on our plants and use fertilizer, but instead to look at a permaculturalist who can help us, take our waste and turn it into compost, sustainable living, recycling goals. We kept on having more ambitions on recycling. So it's really, our whole experience was like this onion, and just continuously peeling it and getting under one layer after the other, and new discoveries on recycling and new discoveries on wellness. And and I think the journey continues. It's a big onion.
Which of these many accomplishments are you most proud of, if you can identify one?
Yeah, I suppose I think more recently, the way it's not awards so much. We were just voted best beach resort in the world by the World's 50 Best, which has become the Oscars for luxury in travel and tourism, because they have 16 regional chairs throughout the world. And then each regional chair chooses 50 judges who are experts in travel. It may be a journalist, it may be a publisher, it may be a travel agent, it may be someone who's a TV commentator running a travel show, people who've traveled far and wide. So they choose these judges. So it's the most comprehensive, because we've won Condé Nast Traveler. The readers of Condé Nast Traveler UK have voted us the best of all categories, not just the best hotel in Asia, but the best of all categories twice. But this was a great award, because it wasn't just one nation, just the UK and just readers and one publisher. It was hugely comprehensive. But the successes that I'm the most proud of is when we've dealt more recently with challenges. I believe this phrase more and more as I've gone through challenges in my life. I've sort of come to see the wisdom of Lao Tzu when he says, good fortune has its roots in disaster. And I sort of liken human beings and organizations to the coastline. It's the storms that actually define and shape us. And so my experiences with cancer on both occasions, how I've overcome those, I've been quite proud of those. I think I managed those processes really well. I looked at a crisis as an opportunity to learn and develop and grow. The Chinese character for crisis is change and opportunity. When you think, okay, there's going to be change, but there's also opportunity, it's a very nice way of looking at crises. The COVID pandemic, we managed that quite well as an organization, and I felt quite proud of all of that as well.
Yeah, hopefully this applies to the current crisis we're facing. you know, politically worldwide, and that
Yeah.
it seems like you know, wars are breaking out in every corner of the world, and you know, I mean, the hatred that goes into it, it's really goes back to the same root of, you know, that the people somehow have lost the ability to get along, you know, which is, and I always compare this. If you look at a place like LA,
Mm.
you know, everybody who comes here ultimately gets along. I mean, there's almost
Yeah.
no, and they come from all places of the world, you know, from places where they hated each other. And so this is an interesting phenomenon. But yeah, I don't want to sidetrack on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, but just to sort of touch on what you've just said, I just feel that you um I overall feel that the world is a bit safer in spite of this growing partisanship. I think this the isolationist strategies since World War II, we've prospered and thrived because of these institutions that have tried to allow us to look at the world as one place, one people, and bring harmony, whether it's the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, and they've of course been weakened by governments, and you have more partisanship, especially in the US. It's terrible between the Republicans and the Democrats, and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, and what's happening in Israel is shocking, and of course Ukraine and Russia, but we also, the media has a tendency to highlight bad news. And overall, I think we're more enlightened. And I think in the internet age, more people are exposed to more culture. Travel, my industry, is growing. It's projected to grow at double the rate of the global economy. So now accounts for 12% of global employment. And of course, when you travel, you experience new cultures. And you see other ways of thinking, and it broadens your perspective. So overall, I feel positive about that, in spite of these Fox News headlines. So that's, I think that sort of summarizes, isn't it? Sort of the News Corp publications just highlighting the negative.
Yeah, and I mean that's probably another one of those traits besides resilience, you know, to look at the world in a positive. So in the long term, you know, I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the next 100 years? But in the long term, I think these crises that we have right now will hopefully be resolved, and maybe there's going to be a unique planetary consciousness, you know, a new planetary consciousness that affects everybody. That, you know, we're going to look back at our current ages like the Middle Ages, where people killed each
Right.
other with religions. And
Yeah.
so let me come back to something personal. You mentioned this about your battle with cancer. Do you want to? So this is something. So you've gone through this not only once but twice. For most people, this is probably the most scary situation that they've ever experienced. I mean, what have you learned from that experience, and
Right.
personally, and how you managed to come out of this, hopefully with, you know,
Yeah.
long-term cure, and yeah. So
I think a couple of things. So firstly, when one needs to make an urgent decision and one needs to respond quickly, then one should. But when one has time, one should try and take as much as one's time as one can. So when I was diagnosed, the doctor wanted to hospitalize me the next day, and it took a week to find out exactly what I had. And we finally got the diagnosis after the PET scan results came in. The doctor was very matter of fact. He said it's stage 4 lymphoma. You have a 50-50 chance. Here are the statistics. And I booked you into the hospital tomorrow. We're going to hospitalize you for a month, and then you can't travel for 6 months. And so pack for a month and come back, and we might put chemo up your spine. And that's what he told me. And so it was quite horrific. And I believed in alternative healing, and that other things like nutrition, mental state, lifestyle, exercise all have an impact. And he wasn't offering me any of that. So I paused and I said, look, I've still got some time because I'm not going to die in the next day. So I took 3 weeks off, and those 3 weeks were very formative. So I think this idea of pausing and taking time when you have the time to make the right decision. And I researched a lot, and Samuel Johnson said nothing focuses the mind more than the prospect of the hangman's noose the next morning. And so when you have this sort of life-threatening, potentially life-threatening illness, at least what you're led to think, and I have views on why it's life-threatening, which I can touch upon after this. When you have that, it focuses your mind. So I went into flow, I read a lot, and 3 weeks later I sort of came to a conclusion that I needed to do the chemotherapy because it was quite progressed, and there was a very high success rate of the chemo. When he said I had a 50-50 chance, when you started analyzing that in detail, and that's the problem with doctors and statistics, you really need to take doctors as consultants and make your own decision, and you have to be the CEO of your body, and you have to do what feels right to you, because if you don't feel the cure's right and you're just following someone else's prescription, then you're not really going to cure yourself. But you've got to believe what you're doing is right. And when he said I had a 50-50 chance, I suddenly sort of looked at the average age, and I was mid-range. So I was most probably around number 50 based on my age. I was 54 or 52. I didn't smoke, so I was already in the better half. I could do 20-30 push-ups at a go, so my level of fitness was better. So I was from being in a 50-50 chance, it's around number 50, I was soon sort of around number 1 or 2 or 3 in the survival. So that changed my perspective. And then, of course, I offered complementary treatments. I did a lot of complementary treatments. That's why I went to Istanbul, because they don't offer that when I did the chemo, the nutrition, hyperbaric oxygen, hypothermia. So that I learned a lot about. So firstly, decisions, move fast, move slowly. As when you have a medical condition, you have to be the CEO of your body, because we're all so different. We're discovering more and more. Science is teaching us that everyone has an individual DNA, so no one human being's the same, and it's not one solution fixes all. Each individual's different, and so what can the doctor do? I mean, he can't know what's good for every single person. He can advise you based on his learning and what he's read, but then you also have to find other opinions and form your own decision. So I think that sort of take ownership of your health, I think, was a very important learning as well. This thing about sort of crises, and if you take crises in a positive approach, it can be very beneficial, because you will change, you will learn new things, and I learned a considerable amount of about wellness. So it was very scary at the beginning, the uncertainty, and then even those 3 weeks which I took off, they were unsettling, because I didn't sleep very well, because I didn't have a clear plan. I was researching, but then after 3 weeks of research, I had a plan to go to Istanbul. I was resolved that I would definitely cure myself. I was 100% sure about that. And I was also excited, because I felt it was going to be an interesting journey, and it was going to be an interesting 6 months of my life where I'd learn a lot. I'd meet new people, learn a new culture. And so Ava and I, after that, we were sitting there at Soneva Fushi watching the sunset, having a glass of champagne. And I said to her, if I were to rewrite history, I wouldn't. And she says, you're quite right too. It was a great experience for me. And then we listed out 37 reasons why I was grateful for what happened. So it's a funny thing, it's a very scary thing, and you don't want to wish that on anyone. But in the end of the day, it actually defined me and it shaped me, and it was a blessing. Having it come back again was a bore, but I again learned new things. At this point, I've had enough of that, and I just wanted to come back again for a third time. Yeah.
That's really an amazing part of your story. So in the last few minutes, so one point that I was going to address is, so you were talking about luxury in the beginning and how you redefine luxury, and there's also something about happiness. I think people often don't get the happiness that they look after if they look for material luxury goods to sort of measure this in. And there's sort of this new science, colleague of mine, collaborator at UCLA, who's working in this area of social genomics, and this attitude of eudaimonia that Aristotle has come up with, where you do not just things that make you happy, but to contribute to the world, meaningful things that benefit others, have a bigger purpose. And I think in many ways, just listening to you, I mean, I have the impression that that's really a philosophy that you live by. I mean, there's a lot of things that you do for the greater good. I mean, like for the environment, you wouldn't need to have to do this. You wouldn't have to do your composting and help a lot of people on these islands with employments. So, is this something? I mean, are you doing this consciously, or is this something you've always had instilled in your value system?
Yeah, sure. I think it's become more and more over the last years as one always evolves, so we had the value system that were how do you say, inculcated into me by my father and his influence and Ava's influence to an extent, and my education at Eton, which I mentioned was a real blessing and was a very formative period for me, and the values that institution, my father, etc., built on me. But then as we learn and as we evolve, and we learn and we experience, we evolve as well. And so I've come to realize that the real sort of key to life and the meaning of life is the relationships we create and the bonds we create. And when you help someone else, you're strengthening a relationship in a way, and you're actually healing yourself. So I think there's a lot of research on how, if you take a walk in the park and you say hello to people, you're continuously stroking yourself. There's a love signal going up your vagus nerve, and that's terribly healthy for you as well. You're improving your health. We know about epigenetics and the messages that are going down into the cells. So I think this idea of love as an operating system and relationships is very important, and at Soneva we try and use love as an operating system, and love in the way of recognizing a genuine other, so and building strong bonds. There's a lot of research that we know about at Soneva, and we are always sort of trying to improve our knowledge on what makes successful organizations. But Google have done a lot of research, and for them it's cognitive diversity that leads to successful teams. So it's not like having 100 sort of top students of a top university. That doesn't give you the cognitive diversity. Psychological safety is very important, and psychological safety really comes from this sort of love operating system, treating someone as a genuine other. This idea of the leader being the on the mountain and belaying his team members. So they've got a rope and they're climbing up the mountain. He's encouraging them to climb, but he's holding on to the ropes. If they fall, he catches them, creating the sense of psychological safety, I think is very important. And then for us, we believe at Soneva that purpose, having an alignment of purpose becomes very important. And so that again touches upon the point you mentioned, this eudaimonia, where you're helping other people. And in a way, if an organization has a purpose to, as I mentioned earlier, to do something more than just enrich the shareholders like Ava and I and our partners, and have a general benefit to society, and if our hosts have a purpose that's aligned to our purpose, then of course that leads to the magical service. So you talked about the magical experience of our hosts. I believe that our slow life core purpose rings true to them, because I mentioned earlier, slow life is also an acronym, because we have 30 to 40 languages. So it stands for Sustainable Local Organic Wellness, Learning, Inspiring, Fun Experiences. So that first L in slow life stands for local. So we don't just hire from the Maldives, we hire from the local islands. And we don't have employees, we have hosts.
Mhm.
So you can imagine walking onto an island with 350 hosts who generally come from the neighboring islands,
Mm.
rather than an island of international employees. The experience is bound to be different just based on the language and how we source people. But then what sort of makes it even stronger is that we have our core purpose, slow life. So now we start engaging with the local community, eliminating the single use of plastic, helping, we recycle 93% of our waste, but now doing that on neighboring islands, setting up waste to wealth centers on 3 neighboring islands. 23 other islands have, we help them with their waste management, reduce water bottling plants like we have on our island, avoiding 100,000 plastic bottles. This makes our hosts very happy to be Sonevians because, when they go to their local islands, they're recognized by their colleagues about what we do. And so they're proud Sonevians, and they wake up every morning wanting to create magic for our guests. And so in a way, our whole philosophy, our core purpose, this idea of understanding the importance of relationships. And then in terms of motivation, we believe strongly that it's not about carrot and stick. And we believe that in the 21st century, when you want people to collaborate, so, your experience at Soneva Fushi was the result of a collaboration of many different skills. At Soneva, we believe strongly that extrinsic motivation, like carrot and stick, bonuses and, punishment and threats, undermine performance in the 21st century. So if you want someone to just paint a wall or move a bag of rice from A to B, then that works. But if you want people to collaborate, and so, we're talking about your experience. Yeah, that's right. I was talking about your experience. So your experience is a collection of inputs from various people. So, just going and having lunch. So you've got the waiter who's thought very carefully about some of our SOPs and best practices, about the location of your chair, how it should be. He wants to make sure you have shade, so he's dependent on a gardener to ensure that they've clipped things back a bit. There may be, the table may be a bit dirty, so the carpenter's got to come and help sort that out. And then you're going to go to the buffet, and you're going to see in the cold room various dishes which the chef have made. But the chef's also very dependent on the gardener who's produced that fresh rocket salad, because the food's great, but the ingredients are fantastic, and that helps a lot. As very humble top chefs say, the key to good food is good ingredients. So it's not just having a horticulturalist, it's a permaculturalist who's thinking about how they can enrich the soil. And then it goes back again, because the horticulturalist now needs good compost. The compost is coming from the kitchen, who are sending their waste food, and purchasing, who are sending the old cardboard from the things they brought. They're sending it to the waste to wealth center. And then the waste to wealth manager is turning that into compost and sending it to the permaculturalist. The gardeners are taking the branches off the tree, giving it to the waste to wealth, the waste to wealth manager, who puts it in a pyrolysis oven. He turns it into charcoal, but he's got a biochar. He gives it again to the permaculturist, who then creates that fantastic salad. So it's all intertwined. So if you're going to have various people collaborating together, carrots and sticks don't work. It's all about giving people a sense of autonomy, about the team they work with, the tactics, the tasks, provided they have the overall objective and the time they take to do it. It's about mastery, allowing them to improve, and being proud every day as they improve and perfect what they're doing. So if they have a sense of pride in creating the most fantastic compost, or creating that most fantastic charcoal brick, or the permaculturist creating the most amazing rocket salad, if that's their pride, then that's obviously going to help the chef, whose pride is going to be to create the most amazing meal, which is then going to help the waiter, because the guest is in a good mood because he's eating well, and then he's going to deliver a great service. So, it's all interrelated. And so I think this idea of autonomy, mastery, and purpose is very important. And it's intrinsic motivations that really drive people. So what we do is we pay a basic salary that is in the top 75 percentile of salaries paid in the area. There's the service charge. and then that's it. You know, we take the money off the table and we focus on other incentives, which is all intrinsic incentives, motivation.
I mean, listening to you, this and having experienced this, and I have to say, you know, it's a first in life for me and for my wife as well. You've really created this ecosystem of wellness with a lot of, you know, this is something that I deal a lot with in my science, with the microbiome, with the health of ecosystems and the diversity and the richness of an ecosystem that determines like overall the health of the organism. And what you've just told me about is one of the richest ecosystems that I have ever heard about in terms of, you know, the hospitality business and going way beyond the hospitality and way beyond the happiness of your guests. It's really it spreads that happiness and satisfaction across hundreds of miles, thousands of miles possibly, to other places of the islands and other places of the Indian Ocean. So yeah, this has really been remarkable.
Thank you, Emran. That's very kind of your to have your time, and thank you for your compliments and for having me on your podcast.
Thanks a lot for doing this, and with gratitude to you, to your wife, for this amazing experience.
Great. And I didn't read your book before the festival, but I'm looking forward to reading it because I got a whole pack of books, you know, from Malsa, our you know, bookshop bookkeeper. So I'm looking forward to reading it.